This is a prophecy of the future. I know most people on the planet are not yet ready to accept that what I'm about to share could be a possible reality. It's why I've been hesitant on sharing it at all. But I feel strongly that this vision carries within it an important message for humanity and offers a perspective that is worthy of consideration. I also believe that there are people out there who may align with how I've seen things, and that perhaps my experience could validate what they themselves have been feeling but have not been able to fully articulate. I do not claim that my interpretation of the vision is totally correct, as I'm limited by my own knowing and filters. I believe there are infinite potential realities and timelines can always shift, but I also believe in the possibility that one could have the capacity to observe a potential future projection. I am simply going to give my testimony of my vision of one particular path that I was shown. What I'm going to share with you is a culmination of almost 20 years worth of premonitions about humanity's future and my process in understanding them, as well as my perception of what the purpose of our existence is, all of which I feel I've been given for the intent of bridging this information forward at a time when it was needed to those who are willing to listen. I've now seen within these visions so much of what I couldn't understand so many years ago, and as we move closer to the potential outcome of that vision, the details of its blueprint have gotten stronger and clearer to a point where I can no longer deny that I am witnessing it unfold before my very eyes. I know there are those out there who are like me and have not wanted to come forward with their insights in fear of ridicule, judgment, and social persecution. We are living in a time where people are being silenced and alternative opinions are being monitored for questioning the narrative that has been pushed to the public. Even if I wanted to share my most honest insights around the global and collective energies, I would likely be censored, deplatformed, or trolled. I am aware that I have to filter much of what I share with my audience, to be considerate and careful with my wording, as to not offend my extended family, friends, or clients who might differ in their stance or perception of how they view what's happening around them. I work with many people from a variety of different cultural, social, political, and spiritual backgrounds, and I have treaded carefully as to not offend any one group with my perspective. I truly believe we are all entitled to view our individual realities as we choose, and ultimately it is your choice to discern whether or not what I'm about to share with you aligns to your higher truth or not. I am not trying to convince you of anything, and I am not attached to anyone needing to believe in my truth as their own. I am not including my name or face in this message, which is a choice that I would prefer to be respected if you decided to share it. And if you do, please do so privately. The original receivers of this audio were those who know me personally or through my work as a psychic and have felt enough validation through their experiences with me to value my insights. They have heard it and gave it to you because they felt you may align with it too. Perhaps you'll feel called to do the same. If there's a possibility it could bring hope, comfort, or a positive focus to any one person in such uncertain times, I feel it will have been worth the effort of documenting it and sending it forward. For those that know me, it's understood that as a medium, I'm in regular communication with a variety of interdimensional beings, such as spirit guides, angels, ancestors, those who have crossed, earth elementals, and extraterrestrials. As a clairvoyant, I have the ability to see and perceive what exists beyond this third dimensional plane and experience energies as though they have physicality, texture, tone, and color. This ranges from the darkest of the dark to source-light consciousness and everything you can imagine in between. I've been honing and refining my gifts as a psychic for over 20 years and have been working professionally as a spiritual guide to countless individuals over the course of my career from all over the world. I have conducted thousands of readings for many people of all walks of life. To begin, I'd like to share with you how these visions of humanity's ultimate future began. My first conscious contact with ETs happened in early 2003, when 3 tall gray beings with large black eyes manifested before me and telepathically downloaded me with, in a matter of seconds, so much information that it was impossible for my human consciousness to integrate. From what little I could grasp, I was able to recall just this: that they are real, that they are more intelligent than human minds can contemplate, that they have technologies that are so advanced that they can traverse time and space almost instantaneously, and that they can shift through dimensions much in the way light travels, that they come from very far away somewhere in the cosmos, and that they have a big influential part in our existence here on planet Earth. Prior to this experience, I had already been seeing anomalies in the sky for a few years. I was aware at the time that nobody else could see them, though I didn't understand why back then as I do now. that I had the ability to see within different frequencies that very few people could see in. I would see them during the night or day, sometimes as many as a dozen at any one time, and though they struck my curiosity, I was not convinced that aliens were driving them. I had no idea what they were. They looked like metallic spheres or a variety of other shapes with plasma-like distortions trailing behind them during the day, or at night they would look like extra bright, oddly maneuvering orbs of light traversing the night sky, sometimes flashing or popping with brilliant lights. I definitely pondered as to whether or not aliens were driving them, but even at that time I was still conditioned to think that ETs were a fantasy, that they weren't actually real. It wasn't until this first visitation that I finally understood that they were. That initial contact was the ultimate initiation, and from there I would have many more interactions that would start out sort of soft and would eventually escalate over the years to at one point being physically touched, to a handful of fully embodied interfaces, to clairaudient conversations, and ultimately in recent years working directly with them as a mediator for incarnate starseeds here on Earth who are ready to awaken to their cosmic origin. I could fill hours of audio reciting these stories of the many accounts of my experiences and how it is I developed my relationship with these ETs. For the sake of the prophetic vision, I just need to convey that there are many races of very advanced ETs from a multitude of civilizations from throughout the cosmos that have been observing Earth and humanity in its development since life was seeded here millions of years ago. This understanding is very much an important part of what is to come. In addition to being prepared by the ETs and acclimating to them and understanding their intentions, there were a lot of insights that came to me from my spirit guides about our life's purpose. This was mostly taught to me through my ability to communicate with departed souls, both earthbound and crossed over, as well as having an understanding of what afflicts them, what guides them, and what happens to them when they transition from life to what is beyond and then back again. I have a strong ability to observe past life experiences and how it affects the soul's journey in the current life. Souls have been incarnating into different lives throughout time, not only on Earth but other planets and dimensions. Every experience is cataloged within the soul matrix, and depending on the vibratory imprint of those experiences, it can directly influence so much of what one's particular life design may be. We often take positive attributes from previous incarnations to assist us in achieving the lessons we want to learn in our current life, as well as carry with us unresolved and unbalanced energies as a sort of homework of the soul, to transcend its density, to heal it, to become wiser, stronger, more refined, and more divine souls. Some spiritual teachings call this karma. So in general, most souls cycle through lifetimes and incur karma, both positive and negative. If we did not appropriately handle the challenges that were laid before us, we will cycle back and be met with them again and again until we learn to react in accordance to the divine. Ultimately, we are being asked to live in alignment with unconditional love, service to others, forgiveness of all and especially to self, and in gratitude and respect for all living things. When we live out of accordance to that higher truth is when we hold on to suffering and lock lower vibratory energies into our soul matrix. And all of these things attract every single experience we have. And because part of the earth experience is to be stripped of all knowing of our connection to source and our infinite existence, we often feel victimized in our realities because we lack the clarity to connect our suffering to the unresolved acts of our previous incarnations. This makes it difficult to see that we are likely experiencing our own karma, and the challenges we face in forgiving our perpetrators is in fact the deep need in our souls to forgive ourselves. Because of this, Earth can be a very challenging school. Many do not fare well. They get so tangled in the karmic load that the realities they now face are full of suffering. But there are souls who have achieved a sort of masterful dance in the game of life, who are inclined to make better choices and regularly balance their karma. The lightening of karmic density raises their frequency, and the soul becomes clearer and brighter until there's no longer any energies blocking them from being able to manifest their highest potential. All of this process is being assisted by spirit. We have our ancestral lineage and our loved ones who have crossed over to support the continuation of our journey forward. We also find guidance from earth spirits, elementals, ETs, as well as our spirit guides and higher self, all of whom are dedicated to assisting us in our spiritual advancement and finding everything we need to live life in accordance to the divine. We also have miracle makers like angels and deities, and of course the infinite and limitless unconditional love of Source, that we all have the ability to replenish our spirits from, so long as we choose to connect to its divine light. But as we can recognize that there is a divine support system around us, we must also recognize that there are other forms of energy and consciousness that do not have our best interest at heart. These are trickster energies, and they work as diligently as our angels do, but their agenda is to tempt us into acting out in accordance with the shadow realms. These hitchhiker-like entities and energetic afflictions is what poisons the soul. It makes us feel fearful, paranoid, disillusioned, disempowered, unbalanced in our emotions, hopeless, vindictive, violent, envious, perverted, and all other aspects of lower vibrational expressions. Collectively, it manifests as things like war, tyranny, famine, disease, abuse, pollution, as gluttonous, self-serving behaviors, and harmful actions that we inflict upon others and even ourselves. Plainly put, there is a battle that is consistently at play for influence over our souls. The only way to protect yourself from these shadow energies is to raise your frequency into the spectrum of light, because shadow cannot exist in light. The stronger your light, the further away these dark entities must remain from you. Because of the karmic cycles, many of us come in with a sort of shadowy baggage, and it takes experiencing a karmic repercussion or the act of intentional spiritual healing to unwield these dense energies. This work must be done so we can lift into the higher frequencies of light. When we come into resonance with the light, the higher vibrational assistants are better able to interact with our spirits and guide us towards a more blessed path. So if you can imagine, there is a spiritual tug of war always happening between the entities of light and the entities of dark, because just as light beings are fueled by our love, the dark beings are fueled by our suffering. I bring this up because it needs to be understood that our world is essentially divided by these two forces. There are those who are more in shadow, those who are more in light, and those who are struggling to decide what side of the shadow or light they want to be on. It seems simple enough that we would all want to be in the light, but it's easy to see how the actions of others and even yourself at times are not in accordance with the light. We are all flawed and no one is perfect. It's not easy to feel patience and compassion towards others in every moment. People are often easily tempted to take a more negative path. It's hard to forgive those that have hurt you, as people often see themselves as the victim and desire restitution for their suffering. Rather than seeking balanced justice, they can fall into the temptation of spiteful vindication and revenge, or may partake in selfish acts that are knowingly hurtful because they justify their wants or needs over the suffering of others. The temporary satisfaction they feel from those indulgent acts is just an illusionary cover to a deep need for healing. Even though they seemingly desire good, their unresolved traumas, the wounded and fractured parts of the soul, are the weak openings that these dark entities attach to, thus enabling them to tempt people into choosing actions that perpetuate the negative karma rather than balance it. Because as long as they keep people in the cycle of suffering, they will have a source of negative energy to feed from. There have been spiritual and religious pathways passed down from many cultures from all over the world throughout time that are trying to teach us this ultimate truth. Stepping away from labels and specific religious ideologies, the bare bones of it all is understanding that we are in a battle between good and evil, and we are all just trying to navigate our way back home to Source. In early 2007, I had my first of a series of 3 identical visions of the future. I believe Spirit has always guided me, and though at times I may not fully understand why I am given certain experiences, everything eventually comes full circle in one form or another. I've come to learn when Spirit makes a point to use patterns of 3, I pay attention. Each vision was exactly the same each time, though each time I saw it, I felt I understood it a little bit more than the last. The first time it came to me, I thought it would happen immediately. I braced myself as though this incredible event would unfold over the next few days. Nothing happened. I eventually wrote it off as a fantastical delusion, feeling humbled and ridiculous that I believed it so strongly. I harbored this as a shame, deeply embarrassed in myself that I actually thought it was going to happen, and when it didn't, I was so glad I never told anyone what I saw. The second time I was shown it, a few months later, I was mystified by how exact the vision was to the first time I saw it, that I thought this has to be true. Why would I see this a second time? The level of total knowing of its validity that I felt was so strong that nobody would have been able to convince me in that moment that it wouldn't happen. But this time, I at least had the awareness that it wasn't going to happen immediately. But it was filled with this feeling as though it would happen soon. That time I felt this overwhelming urge as though I needed to tell anybody who was willing to listen. The quality of hope this vision gave me, I wanted to share it with others so they would feel inspired by it too. But what happened was, I sort of crash-landed back into my mundane life, struggling to survive in a low-paying job, realizing that my life was miserable, and as I took in the reality that I observed around me, I immediately felt that embarrassing shame in myself once again, battling with my inner thoughts, thinking I must be crazy. Besides, who am I that anyone would care to listen? And no one would believe me anyways. So I kept it to myself. But that vision remained burned in my mind. Then a few months later, the vision came for a third time. And just as before, it was exactly the same. Except this time, I cried and I sobbed and I cursed to the sky and I begged them, whoever was showing me this, to stop. I told them it was too difficult for me to know this and then not have it actually happen. But my pleas were not acknowledged, and with tears in my eyes and grief in my heart, they made me experience the vision again. This time I didn't dive into the hopeful exhilaration that I felt before. This time I was uninspired to share it with others. I felt numb and I wanted to disengage, but I couldn't control what I was being forced to see. Back then, I didn't understand why they would torture me with this vision, as it was like holding a glass of water in front of someone who was dying of thirst, letting them taste one drop, and then not giving them the rest. Today, I'm grateful that I've been given this vision, as I understand now that they didn't care what my process was back then. They knew that it needed to be burned into my consciousness so I would not forget, as it would make more sense to me as the years progressed. And as I stand here now, I tell you I am astounded at how aspects of the current reality directly correlate to what I saw. Because in 2007, the world was a much different place, and it was harder to correlate what I was seeing. This is what I was shown. My spirit was ejected from my body, and I floated away from the earth until the entire world came into view. I could see, hear, and feel what was happening all over the planet as though it was one being. It was the collective energy of humanity. I saw that the state of consciousness across the planet was focused in a predominantly negative way. I saw that people all over the world seemed fixated on self-serving and superficial deeds. I could hear the voices of many shouting, pointing fingers of shame and blame, projecting their pain upon each other to satisfy the need to feel rectified and superior. I heard the cries of suffering and hopelessness as so many were being mistreated and abused, made to feel ashamed of who they were or for the circumstances that they felt no control over. And most of all, there was this overwhelming feeling of not being heard. I saw people swept up in focusing their intentions for personal gain, wealth, adoration, and power to try to validate their worthiness over another. It felt like everyone had an every man for themselves attitude. This I saw within individuals, social groups, political parties, cultures, countries, races, and religious organizations. The consciousness of the collective was hyper-focused on aggravating this sense of separation and superiority over others, and that the gaps between these polarized positions was being filled with judgment, hatred, and disdain for those who did not serve their specific ideologies. I saw this overwhelming need all over the planet to put others down, to mock one another, and this grotesque focus on pointing out the faults of those around them in order to assert dominance was beyond hard to digest. It made me feel ashamed of being human. Everyone, including me, was partaking in this mentality on some level or another, and no one group was excluded from being swept up in this horrendous cloud of judgment and persecution. We don't always realize how much we play into these negative behaviors on the day-to-day, but when you see it at the concentrated collective, you realize how terrible and separatist it is. It is the opposite of love. I could see the energetic effects it was having on the planet. It looked like a thick cloud of negativity cloaked the earth, and I watched it get progressively darker and more chaotic, and the thicker it got, the more aggressive, disheartened, and frightened the voices became. It felt like the world was being squeezed, and everyone on it was slowly suffocating in this dark, oppressive cloud. It literally felt like no one could breathe. Then I was shown that something significant happens, something huge. Something so important that the world would seemingly know about it all at once. Though I wasn't shown exactly what the thing was, I knew it was so profound that it captured the attention of the entire planet. I saw that the network of media, meaning radio, TV, and internet, had a huge part in how it was that the whole world would know about this thing all at once. I saw that the ability to spread information in this way would be a catalyst to a very swift and massive awakening that unfolds across the planet. To give you perspective, at this time, no one I knew was even sending text messages. It was shortly after these visions that text messaging became mainstream. Nobody had smartphones, and the idea of viral videos was not yet part of our social vocabulary. I remember sort of arguing in my mind as I was watching this vision unfold, of how could it be that something as lowbrow as the media could possibly help inject a spiritual awakening into the planet. Back then, reality TV was very popular, and all of it was centered around drama, fighting, and the content was exploiting people and their embarrassing moments for the sake of entertainment. People were obsessed with celebrity gossip, and the biggest news at the time was of a very public fall from grace of one of the biggest pop stars of the era. There were no intriguing television shows like we have in abundance now, about the potential of aliens, or shows centered around psychics or paranormal investigations. Most of what was available on TV was mindless entertainment, consumerism, and the overtly negative content of the news. Documentaries weren't even popular unless you went to a specialty section at the video store and rented one. We were limited to whatever cable TV had to offer us, as this was prior to streaming platforms like Netflix, and even YouTube was in its infancy then. Social media was not a thing that everyone did. It was limited to one or two platforms and mostly occupied by young people. We are only then just discovering the potential of that kind of social connection. There wasn't a source for alternative news, and esoteric websites were hard to come by, nor were there support groups for those seeking to understand the mystery school of life. Spiritual trainings were not as accessible through the internet, and people were limited to advancing their spiritual practices based on what their communities had to offer. There wasn't publicized whistleblowers that were out on the front line to the mainstream public as they are today. This was before we had mini supercomputers in our back pocket that could access infinite information at the push of a button wherever we were at any given point in time. This was before we were able to capture evidence of our experiences with high-resolution cameras and share them immediately or in real time as we can today with live feeds. None of this was even in our consideration in 2007, and today we cannot imagine living without it. There is so much information out there now that you can look up anything and find countless resources to satisfy your curiosities about anything. It seems so simple now to understand how information can so easily spread. But in 2007, when I received these visions, this was the one part that was hard for me to wrap my head around. Back then, there was still huge parts of the world that didn't have cell phones or internet access. The few times I shared this vision with friends, I realized how ridiculous it sounded when I tried to credit the media for helping to awaken humanity. You would think the spiritual awakening would have to be ushered in by something supernatural. Yet this is how the vision had been shown to me. It wasn't until January of 2018, when I was living in Hawaii and the whole state got a ballistic missile warning all at the same time. It proved to be a false alarm, but it was the event that made me realize how it is that so many people could potentially find out a specific piece of information all at once. This happened across the entire state, and I knew right then that if this was a possibility, then that could potentially happen across the entire country, if not globally. It validated the potential of these prophetic visions in that moment, and that is when I really started to consider if it might have had relevance after all. But the vision didn't end there. As I watched the media-driven spread of information crisscross the planet, it jolted the consciousness of many on it, and an awareness began to wake up in the people. It created cracks in the cloud that everyone was under, and its thick, opaque cover started to decongest. Once the stronghold of the cloud had given way, a brilliant beam of white and gold light appeared from beyond my peripherals and blasted into the center of Earth, piercing through the cloud of darkness, and injected the entire planet with a divine consciousness. As I witnessed this, I felt as though everyone on Earth had almost drowned, and just when they were on their last breath, this light filled the world, and all at once, it felt like everyone took this deep, satisfying, life-giving breath, and a sense of inner peace filled the hearts of all. The planet itself expanded, as though this breath of life had refilled its depleted and decaying body, and the darkness that once consumed it was instantly eradicated. The earth was now luminous and vibrant, the colors beyond extraordinary, and the brilliant golden aura encompassed all of Earth. I could hear the voices of everyone rejoicing all at once, a great sigh of relief, a chorus of laughter, waves of joy. all together like the sweetest song you've ever heard. The people were filled with gratitude, and this consciousness of love permeated everything. Everyone suddenly understood that they were divine, that they were one, and that they were liberated. And I knew that all of the suffering that I saw the world was afflicted by, and the darkness that had blocked them from truly seeing one another, had been purified, and that we as a people and the planet had been rebirthed into a new world. Now, this vision, though profound, is not the only reason why I'm making this audio, but it is the seed of the most recent series of visitations, visions, and downloads about the state of the world and the potential future that I want to share with you. And for you to understand it in its entirety, I need to share some key points of experiences I had leading up to them. In 2017, I was visited by a new group of beings that I would come to know as Lemurians, who I also believe are very similar to the groups that are called the Nordics, Pleiadians, Tall Whites, or Agarthans. They have been a big part of an ever-expanding team of interdimensional beings who have been in regular communications with me in order to help me prepare for the changes that were coming. The initial message in our first meeting was, "The world as you know it is about to change. The veils of illusions will dissolve and all truths will be revealed." They showed me the progress of humanity across all time and how we have been moving along little by little for eons. There was a destination that we were always headed towards that they showed me as a sort of portal that functioned much like the drain in a tub. As we were floating along towards it, and the closer we got, the more momentum we would experience from its pull. We would begin to accelerate faster and faster, but once we crest the actual lip of its opening, the momentum will seem near instantaneous as we are pulled through the portal, in comparison to the whole journey it took to get there. They explained to me that we have now reached the crest of the lip, and things were about to change very quickly. They prompted me that it was very important I prepare by doing as much personal, spiritual healing and development as I could, as there wasn't much time left before these changes would take place. In early 2019, I would be visited by them again, and they came in with another message. The curtains are open, it's showtime. They said there will no longer be veils between them and humanity, and those who are ready to connect will start being visited. There would be more sightings and more visitations happening all over the planet. In the fall of 2019, they urged I prepare and strengthen my energy as a huge shift was coming. To be honest, I was expecting something a little more uplifting, but what we got was a pandemic. In a matter of days, I saw the entire planet be pulled into a state of fear and panic, and a global shutdown ensued. We as a collective in our history have never experienced this kind of shock. I don't think anyone knew how to navigate their feelings with so much uncertainty around what was happening. This disease, a virus, could attack the lungs and suffocates its host. Suddenly, we were forced to mask, constricting and confining our breath, as many were trying to get accustomed to breathing with fabric over our face. Civil unrest escalated, and we saw race wars ignite after a black man was choked to his death by a police officer. Protests surged, and people all over the country were holding signs saying, "I can't breathe." Fires, unlike anything we've seen, devastated California, Australia, and Russia that were so huge the skies were completely blackened out with smoke, and images filled our screens with people wearing air purification masks to be able to survive the toxic conditions. I found myself continuously stunned to see how reflective this all was to the prophetic vision I saw in 2007. The almost instantaneous global spread of information, the unrest in the world, and the collective feeling of not being able to breathe. This theme of losing our breath permeated in every corner of our reality, being driven into our consciousness. And as we are all processing this new reality, information is crisscrossing the world, and people are sharing their insights and opinions. Just as the mainstream media had the power to lock the masses into a fear reality, it is that same media network that is connecting those who have an alternative perspective and have been voicing their observations around the awareness that things do not seem correct around the narrative. Is this what I saw so many years ago? Might this be a sign that we are getting close to the possibility of what I saw happening? But how does it happen? What initiates the shift? What calls in the light? I want to bring you back to February of 2020. I was driving in my car listening to the radio as I sometimes did, and a newscast came on as they normally do. But this time something was different. I saw a black smog of energy start billowing out of my speakers, and as it filled the air around me, this feeling of dread and fear started to creep into my heart and consume my whole being. This darkness had a consciousness in it. I've dealt with dark entities enough to know how to protect myself from them immediately. This is the nature of my profession, to know these things. And as I was so distracted warding off this entity, totally caught off guard by what I was experiencing, that I didn't really register what it was I was actually hearing on the radio. It took me a minute to understand that what I was seeing and feeling and hearing were all connected. It was the very first newscast about COVID-19 that I heard. Every facet of my being in that moment was screaming at me to pay attention. What I was witnessing was not right. There was something malevolent behind whatever the news was speaking of. It felt dark and had a consciousness in it that seemed evil. I remember thinking, whatever they're talking about has something sinister fueling it, and I decided right in that moment, as instructed to do so by my guides, to be cautious of this information as it is not what it seems. And it is this initial experience that has prompted me to have a huge dose of skepticism around anything the mainstream media was telling us about the virus. In fact, I knew that everything I would do from that point forward would be guided solely by my intuition and not by the accepted narrative. Before I dive deeper into this, I want you all to know that I am aware that what I'm about to say may be triggering for many, especially depending on how one may have navigated their pandemic experience. I'm not here to offer a scientific or medical perspective, and it is not my intention to associate my perceptions with any specific conspiracy theories that may align with what I see. But I am here to share my spiritual and metaphysical viewpoint. My understanding is sourced from spirit and the higher consciousness beings that communicate this information to me, and is also based on the energies I perceive as a clairvoyant surrounding the virus, the vaccine, and its effect on humanity. I don't judge anyone who differs from me in their perception or process of the situation, but I cannot help but stand by my own truth. And as I watched the deepening intensity of this global experience unfold, I held myself in a light of compassion the best I could for those who are being consumed by the fear, and remained silent even though my intuition kept telling me there was a lot of untruths being told to us about it. Out of respect to those who were targeted in the at-risk groups, and being considerate of those who are easily crippled by fear, and fully recognizing that there is a disease that is killing people, I kept my intuitive opinions to myself and only shared my true perceptions to those that I knew felt the same way as me. During the shutdown, many conspiracy theories began to surface, and some of those who work with me as an intuitive guide came to me with their concerns of a hidden agenda behind the pandemic. I will tell you that I had no interest in fueling fears of any kind, whether they were around the mainstream narrative of COVID itself or the conspiracy theories that surrounded it. My intuition was enough for me. I didn't feel the need to try to understand why it is I felt darkness behind it, what the source of that darkness was, and what was its true intention. It could have been anything, and I believe that Spirit will tell me what I need to know when it is necessary to know it. As I saw it, the message I got was clear enough. It's driven by a dark energy. Do not engage with the fear it's spreading, and remain focused on the light. That, in my opinion, was all I needed to hold on to in order to move through it. I did not force this perception on others. In my work, I have to hold space for everyone, even if their perception differs from mine. And it is my job, as I see it, to give people the tools that they need to remedy the anxieties and fears they're facing. If any of my clients ask me of my opinion of what they should believe, I always told them it is not my responsibility to make choices for you, but I guided them on how to attune their energy to their higher self in order to know what aligns with them from a place of love rather than fear. I always encouraged anyone to follow their own guidance and discern for themselves what is in their highest good. This is the same process I use for my own decision making. When the vaccine became available, I tuned in with my guides and had always felt a very clear no, that it is not necessary for me to take it, as I get a strong sense that it would not benefit me and that I would in fact have an adverse reaction to it. I didn't need to know why, I just trusted it, and I didn't feel it was my responsibility to try and understand it for anyone else. I'm telling you this because I want to make it clear that my choices were not motivated by anything other than my own intuition. When being informed about things, there are certain times when there is a clear yes in resonating with what I'm hearing, and there are times when I feel it is not entirely correct. And within both sides of the mainstream and conspiracy viewpoints of the virus and vaccine, I felt overwhelmed by the information, so I always came back to my own inner guidance. It also helped that I always had a very strong vision of our ultimate future. I've seen versions of this vision more times than I'm recounting to you here. And Spirit has always told me that though dark and scary to witness, these processes that we must go through as a collective are necessary to get us to the ultimate reality. I'm continually reminded to trust that we are headed to something greater and to not get distracted by the insanity unfolding around me. They always emphasize the importance of holding on to the vision of the final outcome, and that by getting consumed in the fear was a disservice not only to myself, but the collective. Fear, I was consistently told, was the ultimate illusion and the biggest block that we have to go through as a collective. Because of this understanding, I've always tried to relate to others that it didn't matter what side of the narrative you were on. The most important thing we can do is to keep our frequencies as high as possible, to remain in a state of love and compassion towards one another, and to not feed into anything that perpetuates fear. The game of sides and division that the people are playing amongst each other is just a distraction, a way of keeping your energy engaged with negativity and fear rather than keeping it focused on a more positive and hopeful outcome. Remember that. In March of 2021, I spent a month in Peru working with shamanic medicines. During an ayahuasca ceremony, I was visited by a new ET that I had not encountered before. She appeared before me in full clarity. She had a luminous skin in shades of deep blue, very large almond-shaped eyes filled with bright blue irises, and a white, gold, and pearlescent undulating geometry of light centered in her forehead that seemed to breathe with consciousness as she spoke. She communicated with me telepathically, but her words were as clear to me as if someone was speaking out loud, and the voice I heard was that of a well-toned, gentle, and wise feminine voice. She reached into my third eye, and I felt her recalibrating things. I was a bit stunned at her sudden appearance, but captivated by her beauty and deeply loving and compassionate presence. "What are you doing?" I asked her. "We are upgrading you so that you'll be able to better communicate with us in the future. There will come a time when we will call upon you to assist us." "Who are you?" I asked. "We are Arcturians," she said. I've heard of them before, and I believe I had experienced them from a distance, though this was the first time I had seen one up close, and the first time I've had a direct communication with one. She then proceeded to brief me on the galactic politics, on what was happening to our planet and the intentions they had for our near future. As she divulged this information, a screen of images would play before my eyes to illustrate what she was speaking of. This is what she said, and what I saw. "Your planet has been under the control and influence of a powerful group of beings with a very dark agenda. They have now been dismantled. I then saw images of what looked to be a military-like invasion where many people were being arrested and imprisoned. In the commotion of it, I could not make out what they looked like, meaning if they were human or not, but they felt incredibly powerful, and it was obvious their energy was very dark. You may even say evil." "Well, this is great," I said. "So you're telling me we've been freed?" I never questioned that there was an elite group of very wealthy and very powerful people that controlled the planet, and I was thrilled at the prospect of what this could mean if they had been taken down. Her response was somber and direct. "That was the easy part. What is to come is much harder. Your planet does not know yet that they have been enslaved, nor do they know that they have been freed, and we must now undo all that they have done. There is a great deal of healing that needs to take place. There are meetings happening as we speak about how to best inform your planet that this has happened." I then saw groups of various ETs sitting at large conference tables with humans, some ETs I was familiar with, many I could not recognize. I could feel the gravity of importance of these conversations being had amongst these groups. She then said, "The date has been set and it cannot be undone." And when she said this, I saw the skies were filled with ships of all shapes and sizes all over the planet. I knew that there would come a day when these galactic beings would no longer shield their presence from humanity, and all beings on Earth were going to see them in their fullness, uncloaked and unhidden from our awareness. She then explained, "There are groups of ETs who have decided when it is that they will reveal themselves to humanity, but the consciousness of your planet is not yet ready to receive them. As you sit now, if they were to show up in this way today, chaos would ensue and fear would cripple the masses. There would be aggressive attacks towards us and amongst your own people, and there will be mass suicides because our presence would be too shocking to those who have deeply ingrained belief systems. People would not be able to handle the extremity of this reality brought before them. There is no way, as we see it, to completely avoid the shock your people will endure, but we are coming up with a plan that we hope will greatly soften the blow." As she told me this, I saw images of the potential reality she spoke of. And I promise you it's no kind of reality that we want to have. It looked like a global war zone. She then explained to me that they have had the ability to see the future, and they have been trying to work with the people of Earth in order to guide us through this global awakening and bridge us back to the cosmic connection that has been severed from us. They have been slowly integrating the consciousness of humanity to get accustomed to the presence of ships, advanced technologies, and ETs, most of which she said happen in the dream time, and by influencing those who have created stories and imagery of a reality where we are living in a unified universe. There have also been people on Earth that have known of this plan, and they have been injecting this awareness as much as possible through our media. She also said that there are many ET incarnates on our planet who are part of this galactic plan, who are playing out human lives, and they are now being awoken and reactivated to the original mission so they can assist humanity as we acclimate to this new world that we are headed to. I understood that I was one of them. She also explained that those who have had control of this planet also could foresee the potential future, and much of what we are experiencing today has been part of a plan that has been in momentum for thousands of years. She explained that much like a high-speed train, we cannot stop it in its tracks. It would be calamity. Part of the process of this awakening requires them to allow the trajectory of the original plan to continue to play out as they finalize how it is they will disclose to our planet the truth of our reality. She said that most of the people that we consider to be leaders of Earth are not fully aware of their participation of this enslaved reality we are in. She said that they have a warped belief that what they are doing is good, though their consciousness lacks the ability to see how what they are doing is in fact oppressing the people, because many of them are operating at a frequency that makes them susceptible to lower-level entity influences. She assured me that behind the scenes there's a team of galactic beings who very much desire the best possible outcome for our planet, and they are working hard on our behalf. She said that they were sharing this with me because there would come a day that they will want me, and others like me, to help humanity understand who they are and why they're here, so they can better integrate and soften the shock that they will encounter as this disclosure unfolds. As you can imagine, I was overwhelmed with this information and immediately questioned if this was actually happening. This experience was the furthest thing from what I thought would happen during my ceremony. I have done ceremonies in the past, and all of them have been centered around healing things that were personal. This is the first time anything of this nature had ever happened to me during a ceremony. And when I began to question if I had just heard and experienced what I did, she said, "Let's go over it again." And she continued to reiterate the entire conversation. I asked more questions in order to deepen my understanding of how it all worked, and her answers were clear and direct and never skipped a beat. Yet after the second, more in-depth review, I still had a very difficult time wanting to accept what I was seeing. I wasn't sure how I could move on in life knowing this, and having no one else around me know it too. And so she walked me through it a third time. It was after the third review that I told her, "Okay, I accept, and I will do what is necessary to be the best of service when it is time." While still in Peru, I visited Machu Picchu, and I was approached by a group of beings I associate with the Lemurians. They showed me many things, but most importantly, they informed me that they had been stewarding that region far before humans ever acknowledged its existence. I saw them there as they have always been, helping to channel out energies from a multitude of ley lines that they said intersected in those mountains. Their purpose has been to help maintain these channels, so built-up Earth energies would not completely overwhelm the planet. They told me that in the entirety of their history there, the frequencies are now much higher than they have ever been. In June of 2021, I traveled from my home to California for a month-long visit. Going to Peru was a spiritually focused journey, so vibrationally the energy was quite open and I felt safe. It didn't feel like much of a contrast from the tropical environment I was used to, and I remained in the jungle isolated with an intimate group almost the entire time, so I never felt bombarded by the collective energies of the people there. But in just a few short months since that trip, the vaccine had been rolled out and most everyone already had gotten their shots. I had no pre-existing expectations of what my visit to California would be like, outside of looking forward to seeing friends and family that I've not seen since before the pandemic started. In fact, my trip to Peru was so easy in spite of the extra protocols that I assumed traveling in the States was going to be much easier. What I got was a spiritual wake-up call. I look back now and see the true purpose of that trip was to give me perspective on how distorted the energies really were. I am someone who becomes very accustomed to the frequency of the places that I live, and when I put myself in new surroundings, I tend to be ultra sensitive to the places I go because, from my clairvoyant perspective, there is a stark difference in all aspects of energy. Especially coming from the islands of Hawaii. Hawaii is a very powerful vortex in itself, so coming from there to anywhere always requires a bit of an adjustment. But this is not new to me. It's always been this way, and I've traveled back and forth between California and Hawaii countless times over almost 20 years. But this time it was different. Shockingly different. When I landed in California, I was horrified by what I saw around me. I instantaneously saw this dreadful energy cloaking everything. It looked like this massive black cloud, and I felt these tentacle-like appendages reaching out and trying to grab onto me and pull me into its darkness. What was so alarming is that this cloud felt like it had a consciousness to it, and at moments I could see these beady red eyes looming at me. Its agenda was to make me succumb to fear. Seeing demons or parasitic entity attachments on people is not new to me. It's a visual burden I don't often describe because I don't think people want to know that energies like this exist. But this was on another level. I have never seen anything of this caliber. An entire building, yes. Maybe even a massive land, I've seen an entity like darkness overwhelm it. But an entirely densely populated city, and everyone within it? I was deeply disturbed, and it was challenging to process. But in my work, I am often required to help people dispel dark energies, so I understood immediately what I was dealing with and felt confident in my ability to keep this energy at a far enough distance that I would be able to energetically breathe. What was sad was having to observe everyone else who was consumed by it. They looked sickly, pale, with a gray film over them, looking as though the life force energy had been sucked out of them. There was sadness and fear in everybody's face, and everyone moved around like masked zombies in a haze. Every place I went had a giant TV blasting the news channels, and all it talked about everywhere you went was COVID, deaths, a deadlier variant, and how dangerous it was if you didn't get the vaccine. Even as I was trying to enjoy my meals in restaurants, this horrible dialogue filled the room of death and fear, and no one seemed to care. This energy was reminiscent of the black fog I saw billowing out of my speakers the first time I heard a radio newscast about COVID. I'm seeing how they are pumping this energy everywhere through the media, and everyone is lost in its hypnotic trance. They had fully acclimated to this reality. All I kept thinking was, how are these people not seeing what's happening to them? It was profound to witness how desensitized they had become. As I traveled north out of the city, one by one I reconnected to old friends, people I've known for huge lengths of my life, though I've not seen them in years, and as can be expected, people change. But the changes I saw this time were not positive. In fact, I saw the same depleted fear like a gray film glazed over almost anyone I saw. Friends that I knew to be courageous and powerful were now living in a life of recluse and anxiety because of how traumatized they'd been with dealing with the fear around the virus. Friends who I admired for their rebellious nature and commitment to living an alternative lifestyle, who abandoned the mainstream expectations of how one should live, eating vegan or organic, supporting local farmers, healing their bodies with holistic practices as to not support big pharma, to choosing homesteading and growing their own, and shopping local rather than support big box chains, were now so proud to announce to me that they got their vaccine and how great it is that we can get back to normal now. I could actually feel the recoil in some of them when I told them I didn't get it, nor would I ever. I honestly didn't have an opinion about anyone's personal choice. When I felt that they had it towards me and mine, I felt offended, and could see how easily someone could be pressured to follow the crowd, as it was just easier that way. This was deepening my awareness of how intense this whole situation had been and how desperate people must have been feeling to find relief from their fear. I realized very quickly that I had taken for granted what a beautiful vortex of the islands that I live on. We're in the middle of the ocean, very isolated from the rest of the world, and when COVID was in its height, we simply stopped letting people fly in. The island I live on didn't even have one case of COVID for many months. It's a small landmass with a limited amount of people, and being an island, there's a sense of security in knowing that people just can't come in without anyone knowing. There's also salt water and clean air, which is constantly purifying stagnant energies. Also, the cultural aspect, as it is one of the only states that is mostly indigenous, and they have still carried their traditions, which are deeply mystic and spiritually grounded and permeate everything. So all this combined meant that the collective energies of fears were always being balanced by this very powerful healing vortex, and I had the good fortune to have been living there while we were adjusting to the pandemic reality. In contrast, when going to the mainland, people are on one giant mass of land that lacks clean waterways to help move energies, with many very populated, congested, and sometimes polluted areas, and with a mass of people who do not align on their spiritual practices, if they have any at all. This combined was a much denser frequency and was not equipped to transmute as much of that fear energy that was being fed into it. After weeks of being on the mainland, I noticed a change in myself. I was beginning to get ultra paranoid about sanitation, germs, and touching anything. I've always maintained good hygiene practices, especially since the pandemic, but this had escalated in me to a paranoid level. And though I noticed it, I kept justifying it because I was now in a much more populated area with all kinds of people who I don't know where they had been. My psychosis had gotten so bad that I started developing odd headaches, and the slightest tinge of a symptom would have me whirling in panic. After about 3 weeks in California, I had convinced myself that I possibly contracted some sort of brain parasite because of the nature of the headaches, and that my vision had been failing for quite a while, but I'm only now noticing because it seemed though I was going blind. My vision was blurrier and blurrier by the day. This wasn't something I thought maybe was happening. I was convinced it was happening. I was in a constant state of anxiety and energetically exhausted. To my good fortune, I unexpectedly encountered a shamanic healer who did a treatment on me. She focused her work around my head. I felt her gathering this sludgy energy from my heart chakra up, and when she had collected the bulk of it, she began to peel it off my head. My left eye popped through the muck, and it was like this light and color flooded into my vision. Immediately I could see crystal clear through that one eye. It was in that moment that I understood that all the symptoms I was feeling was something that was outside of myself and not actually me. She continued to remove this energy, and it was an instantaneous night and day difference. It was as though the color of the world around me had been faded, and as soon as she removed this energy, it was like someone put the lights back on. The colors of the world saturated everything again, and my brain literally felt like it was taking these deep, full breaths of fresh air. I was breathing in light. My life force had flooded back into me. I felt amazing for the rest of the day, but by the end of the next day, I began to notice how I was being pulled back into the paranoid, fear-based perspective, despite the definitive clarity I now had that these feelings were not from me. This is how powerful this energy is. By the time I got back to Hawaii, I plummeted into a dark hole of hopelessness, despair, and anxiety to a point that I remained bedridden. It was a spiritual hell. This is not my character at all. I do not battle with anxieties and fears in this way. I eventually had to get energy healing from someone else to get me through it. I discovered that I had acquired an energetic parasite. It was latched in my back between my shoulders. This energetic parasite was feeding on my energy and pulling me into a hopeless, disempowered fear state. As soon as it was removed, everything instantaneously went back to normal. No more paranoia, anxiety, or hopelessness. I was horrified at the strength and intensity of this parasite, and stunned at how it was able to make its way into my energy field. Parasitic attachments cannot attach to someone if they are full of light and operating at a high frequency. That light and flow within the soul matrix protects it from lower density energies and entities. I generally can keep my energy strong enough, and if I feel myself fall off balance, my clairvoyant sense allows me to catch when energy is off and do what is necessary to remedy the issue before it becomes a bigger problem. The collective fear cloud was so enormous, it wore me down to the point of fragility and vulnerability that an energetic parasite was able to latch in. I am pretty confident on my ability to hold my boundaries and protections up, and if this can happen to me, I now understood why everyone looked as they did in California. And if it had me for as long as it did without me realizing what it was, it made me wonder how many other people were afflicted with this and are totally unaware. that they are going through the motions of their life, adjusted to the bleakness and drain of the experience, because everyone around them are also in the same fog. There's not enough contrast to see it for what it is. I believe that trip was divinely placed so I would get a super clear understanding of the spiritual nature of this battle we're in. So everything I've explained to you is what I felt was necessary for you to know before I tell you about the last contact and download of the potential future that I see. It is still very much in alignment of what I had already seen over the years, but this time I was given a more detailed understanding of how it actually unfolds. Within it were key messages for humanity and guidance on how to move through it in the best way possible. And it is because of this that I feel compelled to share it at all. I ask you to consider that if what has been asked of us individually to support this vision is in the realm of possibility for you to align to, it would be but a small effort on your part that could potentially elevate you and those around you, regardless of whether this unfolds exactly as I saw it. It takes the effort of many to see us to a better future, no matter what that path may be. And once again, I tell you, I do not claim that this is absolutely how it's going to happen. But from my point of view, I have been given these powerful visions, and so I must stand by my experiences, because they are as real to me as anything. And if I get to the end of this life, and this has not transpired in even the slightest reflection of what I'm about to say, then I will humbly be the first to admit that I was wrong. Though I must tell you, I rather go my whole life with the hopeful belief in this as a possibility than go one day with the feeling of uncertainty and hopelessness without it. I told you about my feelings and experiences around COVID and the vaccine for a reason. I wanted to let you know how it is that I formulated my perception and choices based solely on intuition, but was unattached to trying to understand why I felt as I did. I've been holding space for everyone's different viewpoint, so none of what people wanted to assume about COVID and the vaccine really mattered to me. I just trusted that we would end up in a better place. I tell you this because what I'm about to say is not what I expected nor wanted to be told. They, meaning the ETs, angels, and spirit guides who give me this information and visions, told me that the virus was created. It was created by a group who wanted to control humanity through fear, because with fear they can assume power over the people. They said that this virus was already on its way out, that it had always had a natural expiration date, and it is losing its hold on us. We have already moved through the peak of what it could do to us, and it won't be long until it is no longer able to be used as the catalyst to keep us fearful of each other. They said that while it does have the ability to kill people, its effect on the whole of humanity could be compared to a scratch, not like the big, gaping, festering wound that the narrative has been pumping to the public, portraying it to be untreatable and far more dangerous than it actually is. So they could justify taking the insanely extreme measures that they have, which has disempowered us as a people and systematically stripped us of our basic human rights. They said that those who have created this know full well that they have a very limited amount of time left to utilize COVID as a reason to enforce their true agenda, which is the vaccine. Well, doesn't the vaccine help? I asked. They then showed me a frightening image of a wealthy old man with fistfuls of sharp syringes dripping with the vaccine, and a crazy, enraged look in his eyes, violently and repetitively stabbing them down upon the people. I was horrified. Why? I asked. Why are they so desperate for people to take this vaccine? What is in it? They then told me in a way I could comprehend, because I am not a doctor or a scientist, and I do not have the vocabulary or understanding of things of this nature that they could have pulled from my awareness to help explain it. This is what they said and how it was shown to me. That there are particles in the vaccine that, when injected into the body, they disperse through the system and distort the electromagnetic frequencies, misaligning the current of light force energy that moves through the energy body. More or less, the soul matrix, this intricate web of sacred geometric energy lines that feed source energy into our light bodies, that has the ability to invigorate the chakras and heal the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical body, as well as enhance our psychic abilities and intuition, and integrate downloads and guidance from source, are being blocked by the particles that are in the vaccine. It halts people's energy that are on the pathway to ascension from accelerating into higher frequencies, or locks people into a lower vibrational frequency that they are already in. It hinders them from accessing source energy, which aggravates and amplifies the fear energy that brought them to taking it in the first place. So rather than conquering the fear that they should have felt from the security of being protected by the vaccine, it only created more of it, therefore luring people into supporting the act of continued separation, segregation, superiority over others, and complacency in following the narrative without question. But all is not lost, because they told me that the power it has to suppress our light bodies is weak, so long as the host consciously rewires their energy back into its original alignment. They told me that those who already have a more holistic lifestyle and spiritual practice and intuitive awareness would naturally rewire themselves back, meaning those who have been diligent on eating clean, like an organic or more plant-based diet, and have kept their bodies free of things like chemicals and pesticides, who care for their physical bodies with things like exercise and yoga, and people who meditate regularly and often or see energy healers will be able to reroute their energy flow and come back into their original alignment. The vaccine particles over time will no longer affect them, but it will halt their progression in integrating more with the light until they have achieved full realignment. For those that have no spiritual practices or tools, those are the people of concern. Those are the ones who are going to be continually affected by its ability to block the prana, chi, or life force energy, whatever you want to call it. And over time, this will continue to oppress the energy body, making it harder for them to tap into their own intuitive guidance, feel hopeful, empowered, to spiritually advance, and eventually heal their own bodies as effectively as it naturally should. And as uncomfortable as it is to bring you this insight, knowing that it might challenge so much of what you've been told or made to believe, it is necessary because it only takes conscious awareness of what has been done and an intentional initiation of some basic spiritual practices to reset the system back to its origin. But it cannot happen unless you do the work. To be clear, I do not claim that there is nothing of benefit possibly interlaced within the vaccine that has the ability to resist the virus. I'm not even telling you that you shouldn't take it. But for those of you who are considering it or already have, all I'm saying is be aware of what you are doing to your system by injecting this into your body. Just like many modern medicines, there is a list of side effects, which is sort of like the price you have to pay in order to get the perks. What I'm telling you is that the side effect is oppressive to your frequency and will sever you from light force energy. So might we not wonder, why would they want to do such a thing to humanity? And why would they want to do it now? The ETs answered this for me. They showed me that our planet has been moving throughout our galaxy, and the trajectory of its movement is taking us through some very high frequencies that exist beyond the borders of Earth. They showed it to me like brilliant ribbons of light that were delicately caressing the planet. These energies are like a healing massage, activating the consciousness of humanity, and the acceleration of these high vibratory fields are breaking up deeply embedded, stagnant, and stuck energies, not only within the planet but our soul bodies, as well as the collective. Because these cosmic ribbons of light are dislodging the compacted energies of lifetimes of traumas and suffering, there's a lot of emotional wounds manifesting in the individual realities and in the collective realities, meaning unresolved traumas are coming to the surface and being forced to be purged. Individually, this would show itself as challenges within our relationships, health, and well-being, forcing us to address truths about our personal imbalances that may be uncomfortable and disheartening. We are also seeing this as racial, cultural, political, and sexual imbalances that have been buried and oppressed for too long, and now is rearing its ugliness into the conscious awareness of humanity. These energies are being forced to be addressed and healed for the masses. It also manifests as catastrophic natural disasters and climate change, all of which has escalated to a point of great concern. This is a massive healing purge, and as you know, when we are overcome with sickness, the purge we must endure for wellness is not always pleasant, but it is usually followed by a great flush of relief. We are in the purging part of this shift right now. It is happening before our eyes, and the intensity of its expulsion is going to be overwhelming for the masses. Just as our bellies twist and churn before we have to heave and heave again, our planet and humanity as one oversoul is experiencing this painful process now. I can't express enough that this is all an unpleasant but necessary part of the process. Those who have over their many lifetimes been doing the work on the soul level will not be as adversely affected by these energies as much as those who still carry a great deal of density within them. It is unfortunate to say that most people on the planet are still very much burdened by the karmic load and have not done the work, or have not been able to do enough of it that they are now experiencing distress, unrest, and despair in a variety of ways, however it is meant to manifest as we go through this shift. They assure me that everyone, regardless of the experience laid before them, is in agreement to what their specific story is meant to be, because the negative experiences that many will go through are meant to balance them so their souls can ascend. They explain to me that this time now is deeply embedded into the hidden consciousness of all, that by divine design, we would come to a time where these energies have opened up portals of healing, and we might access this divine truth and do the work necessary in ourselves to dispel as much of the wounds of our spirits as possible in order to prepare for this great shift. That there are groups of souls that have mastered their lessons, that are here to assist their fellow humans in awakening their consciousness and healing their spirits, so they too can elevate the collective energies and help us reach ascension faster. In addition to this, there are many ET groups from all over the cosmos who have sent their own to incarnate as humans on the planet. And these starseed beings bring a very high frequency that has been working as a sort of template for the rest of humanity to align to, therefore also accelerating the shift. These starseed beings are volunteers. They are the groups that have helped bridge spiritual practices to humanity throughout our history, that we now observe as spiritual pathways to enlightenment, and in more recent generations, they have been the ones to revolutionize how it is we are living by teaching us how to exist more harmoniously with Gaia and each other. They injected art, music, technology, medicine, energy healing, and earth-saving practices into our realities. And the newest starseeds, the youngest group of children on the planet, are holding the highest frequency of all, because they are here to solidify the new way of being into our reality. Many starseeds are totally unaware that this is who they are. They may simply just have a desire to be good or do good for all, discreetly disguised as a human being on Earth, stripped of the memory of who they truly are. But what is so unique about this specific time now is how these cosmic energies are affecting our consciousness, and so many starseeds are being offered an opportunity to remember where they came from and what their original mission was. They are remembering that they came to assist in elevating humanity's consciousness to the next level of their spiritual evolution. They told me that just as the good are influenced by higher consciousness beings to inspire good things in the world, the darker energies do the same by working through those who live in a lower vibration. These lower vibrational humans are overcome by the trickster energies, and they are the ones that have been a part of inventing oppressive technologies and health practices, poisoning our food, our planet, or part of the group that inject art and music that hypnotizes people's consciousness into engaging with fear or self-serving and superficial behaviors. None of them are conscious that they are being manipulated and influenced for this purpose. The darker beings that orchestrated this pandemic know that our planet would be moving through these higher frequencies at this time, and that masses of people would begin to spiritually awaken very quickly, and that they would lose hold of the suffering of its people that they feed on. So they have been systematically preparing for countless generations so that in this time now, they would be able to limit our ability to be influenced by these ascension energies. They told me that if COVID had not happened, the acceleration of the collective consciousness would be very obvious across the planet. People's psychic gifts would be opening. They would be overcome with synchronicities, auric and intuitive phenomenon, and tap into their creator potential with amazing feats of positive manifestation. People would have a very clear lens to see through lies and illusion, and they would have a greater sense of love and compassion towards all living things. But the fog of fear created from COVID consumed the planet, like a collective consciousness experiment put upon us to be our own oppressors, because they understand that we are powerful creators and that our thought consciousness creates the reality we exist in. And if we collectively agree that we are weak and want others to control how it is we live and think, then that is the reality we will continue to be a part of. Every self-limiting belief that we have adopted and adhered to within our souls throughout time is exactly what we have become. Thoughts like, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm talentless, I'm ordinary, I'm sick. All of these deeply embedded programs that we hold within our consciousness is what ultimately shaped the design of our lives. They told me that the biggest lie that has ever been put on humanity is that we are limited, that we are powerless, and that we are unworthy, and that if humans truly knew what we were capable of, we could instantaneously change the whole of our existence with one collective intentional thought. They showed me the earth, Gaia, our mother, as her divine feminine self, and she looked malnourished and was being brutally raped, mutilated, and overcome with disease. These afflictions that she endured were the collective atrocities that we were afflicting upon each other and the planet. The violence and abuse amongst the people, the ignorance and disrespect of the natural world. For every ounce of suffering any one person endures or inflicts, the mother suffers too. She is a reflection of our pain body. My heart and mind observe this terror being done to her, so heart-wrenching and painful to watch, and my protector spirit could only think to shout out, "Enough! No more! We are done!" Feeling if I believed it enough, I could stop it. But the light of my belief seemed so small against the whole of all the negativity. The ETs then showed me that though I felt like my light was not strong enough to break through the whole of all the darkness, to hold my energy in the light is as potent as tens of thousands holding theirs in shadow, as even the smallest light can illuminate a sea of darkness. And though it seems that there are so many people consumed by the shadows of suffering, it takes far less of those who are truly aligned to the light to illuminate this world for all. Then, to my surprise, a UFO manifested above me. A craft that was much larger and much closer than any I had ever seen. And almost as soon as I took it in and acknowledged its presence, it faded from my view. I immediately began to question if I saw it at all. It was as though there was this energetic exoskeleton of a massive, translucent craft the size of a football field hovering above me. It seemed as though if I stood up and chucked a stone in the air, I might hear a ting on the bottom of it. Though I knew it must have been quite a bit higher in the sky, it was just so massive. I could make out the streamlined, geometric shape of its exterior, and there was a bright flashing light that pulsed from its center, which was what grabbed my attention in the first place. Though I could not hear it, I sensed a deadening of sound in the space I observed it to be until it left. And though it was not fully manifested in the physical, because of my clairvoyant lens, I was able to make it out enough to know it was there. And as I began to try to convince myself that I had, in fact, not just seen what I thought I saw, it swooshed by, now higher up in the sky, gliding just slow enough for me to make out that it was the same ship I just saw hovering above me moments ago. And even after the second time it manifested, I still took into question if this is what I was seeing. And it came back the other way and revealed itself to me just enough once more. And with that, they downloaded to me the purpose of this sighting. They told me that they wanted me to understand that they have the ability to be in super close proximity to us, and we would not know that they are there. I suddenly had awareness that there were not only many ships in the sky, but there were many ETs of all different kinds all around me. Not in full third-dimensional manifestation, but enough for me to acknowledge that they were present. They told me that the borders that once existed between us and them are no longer hindering their ability to be close to us. But they said they are not going to descend to our third-dimensional plane, that they are on standby in very close proximity, waiting for us to ascend to their higher dimensional plane. And the more aligned we get into the higher frequencies, the more solidified they will become to our awareness. It sort of felt like the event was happening, but we didn't even know we were there or that it started. They explained that because they were in a higher frequency, that time did not move like it does in the third-dimensional space. So what from their end seems momentary might feel quite drawn out on our end, lasting many months, maybe years. And we are now in the window of time that as people start awakening and sort of popping into their dimension, they will be ready to seize our momentary shifts into their dimension to assist those that are awakening into this higher frequency reality. They said that they will not overwhelm people, as it will start subtly and will only be as much as each individual is ready to receive. They said it starts while we sleep with UFO and alien-like dreams, and will elevate to the waking time with auric phenomenon, vibrations, orbs, ringing in the ears, the sense of presences, telepathic transmission, the feeling of upgrades and downloads, to sightings of UFOs, to partially solidified interfaces, and then eventually to fully embodied visitations. This acceleration of consciousness will happen over a phenomenally short window of time in comparison to the many thousands of years that we existed with extremely limited abilities. They said that there are some ET groups who have had the ability and purpose of manifesting in our third dimensional space, and those are the ones that have been part of the many recorded sightings and encounters priming humanity for this global awakening. They have served their purpose, but we are not only meant to align with them, as there are even higher density beings who have had no desire to drop into the dangerous and toxic conditions of the third dimension. They are waiting for our planet to evolve enough to be in coherence with them, and they have been doing all that they are able to in safely guiding us to this higher dimensional reality. I asked them if the world was ready to see them in their full manifestation, and they very sternly said no, like a not even close kind of no. And when I asked them if I was ready, they also said no, but I was more ready than most. Though I have had many more visitations and communications than most people, I do not exist with full awareness of their presence in my everyday. I still have a lot of personal work to do to be able to hold myself in close enough frequency with them to interface with them with unobscured clarity. To see and hear them as though they are as solidified as me is incredibly rare and does not last long. Once we all ascend, I understand that the connection will be constant and unabridged. They then showed me that the planet was essentially divided into 3 major groups. Group 1, the smallest group of all, those are the ones who have maintained their spiritual alignment and are awoken. They are committed to their spiritual faith and rely on their own intuitive abilities and believe in their manifesting power. They have not been swayed by the shadow forces and have easily sensed when untruths were being told. I saw them as spiritual guides, leaders, and light workers all around the planet. They have managed to keep their consciousness above the oppressive fear cloud by utilizing their spiritual tools and practices, and are dedicated to being a voice of positivity and compassion in a reality where so many want to focus their energy on fears and judgments over others. Then there is Group 2, which is bigger than the first, and they are the group that comprises of the truly dark, self-serving abusers, sociopaths, and psychopaths with purely evil intentions that are here to keep darkness and suffering in the world. And in Group 3, which is much larger than the first 2 groups, this group consists of the ones that are somewhere between the other 2. They are the ones that are still struggling with the temptations and oppressions of shadow and their deeper desire to be truly good. Many in this group are actually well-intentioned beings who make good choices in life, but they are not spiritually awoken or understand that they are divine, infinite beings that are one with Source. They have bought into the illusion that they are limited and see the whole of their potential from a physical point of view. This is the group that has those that get caught up in the game of sides for seemingly good cause, but are unaware of how they are adding to the energy of shame and blame, separation and fear. This also includes the many who should be spiritually awakening now, but are being oppressed by the vaccine, as their frequency is being stifled in order to keep them buried under the fear cloud and separated from the light. Please understand that being vaccinated or unvaccinated does not determine which group you belong to. Your place is solely decided upon your level of spiritual consciousness. The ETs said that those of Group 1, the awakened ones, are going to continuously benefit from the high-frequency energies that are encompassing the planet. They assured me that there are more and more waking up, furthering their spiritual development by the second, that they're everywhere, and though they have not fully come forward or are openly talking about it, it is blossoming behind the scenes. You will know you are part of this group if in just the last few years you have seen your life lift and suddenly accelerate into a positive direction. You will have become more in alignment with your highest potential, and you will be reaping the rewards of many things that you've been trying to manifest in your life. You will have noticed that despite the fact that there are so many who are suffering through the blow of the pandemic, you had somehow managed to be positioned in such a way that you were able to breeze through it without being totally devastated. You will have had an empowered surge to make a huge shift in your life, whether it be changing the quality of people you surround yourself with, the place you live, or your career, and find that you no longer have tolerance to anything that creates negativity of any kind in your life. You will also have had a perceived massive spiritual awakening or acceleration, and notice that your intuitive gifts have exponentially increased, observing the magic of synchronicities and manifestation all around you. You will have found yourself to be quickly and efficiently moving through your blocks, imbalances, and fears as you have the tools to get yourself back into alignment with your higher self and a greater truth, despite the hopeless fear mentality that saturates our world. And even though I did say that the vaccine would have had an effect of slowing this momentum down, because the awakened ones understand that they are energy and that they can shift their frequency, they are the ones that will realign themselves to be more in coherence with the light and be able to continue towards their spiritual advancement and ascension. They told me that this acceleration is going faster and faster by the moment, and that we will see this group advance very quickly in a very short window of time. Their psychic gifts will be opening up in ways that are beyond our imagination, as they are the ones that the higher ETs are on standby to assist, teach, and upgrade as they lift into the higher dimensional reality. Because they are going to be so illuminated, the contrast and separation between them and those who remain stuck in the old, low vibratory frequencies is going to be more obvious than ever. It will be like a magnetic force of gravity, where groups within like frequencies will begin to congregate. Those in the light group will be driven and inspired to spread the light in any way they can, facilitating healings, gathering in groups to teach and share these spiritual practices and truths. Their life will revolve around self-healing, healing of others, and the healing of the planet. Those who stay behind will add to the fear and exist in a space of hopelessness, depression, and anxiety, and will feel powerless to pull themselves out of their own suffering. They will fear their future. They will pocket in areas that are set to experience social and political unrest and be bombarded with natural disasters, disease, and violence, as well as experience struggles within their personal lives, soul groups, and communities. They will feel stuck and unable to transition out of their oppressive situations or lack the empowered will to create a better life for themselves. They will blindly bow to the pressures instilled by their governments and peers. Everything in their life will be a manifestation of the unresolved karmic energies or embedded emotional traumas that they were unable to work through. And because they are not benefiting from the ascension energies that are surrounding the planet, it will be difficult for them to navigate their healing of mind, body, and spirit with efficiency. Because they lack the empowered awareness that they could have shifted the density from them with these spiritual practices, they will have to go through manifesting their imbalances in the physical as these unfortunate experiences in order to balance the karmic debt their souls need to reach ascension. The contrast between these two groups will become so intense that it will be as though they are living in two different worlds, though they will be very much aware of each other. While one group is experiencing this incredible spiritual awakening and advancement, the other will not have the capacity to believe it. Though Group 1 will be more aligned to have a smoother path in front of them, it will be incredibly difficult to witness the others go through the suffering. I was told that we are in this transition now, and have only seen the tip of what this extreme polarization will look like. It will be devastating to be in the suffering and devastating to observe it. When consciousness awakens, people will be reconnecting to their higher self, recalling their past incarnations, visiting with ETs, having full contact with their spirit guides, angels, and ancestors. There will be no sense of separation between them and their loved ones who have crossed over, as they will be able to see them and communicate with them in an even more lucid way than some of the best mediums can today. They will see the earth spirit and elementals, and may even tap into some superpowers like telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, and teleportation. This heightened awareness will make them ultra-sensitive to seeing all aspects of the energetic world, including energies that are out of balance, and this ability to see these distortions will make them effective healers, as they will be able to recognize where healing needs to take place and do what is necessary to facilitate it. They will help the earthbound spirits who have been trapped and unable to cross over, and support the living in opening up their energy bodies to integrate more light. The further they evolve, the more assistance and guidance they will receive from the beings within the higher dimensional planes. There will be some within this group that are more advanced and will act as pioneers and guides for those who are coming through right behind them. As the collective light from Group 1 amplifies, it will inspire some of those from Group 3, and this awakening will trickle in and pluck them from the shadows one by one, so that they too can join the collective effort to move towards true enlightenment. And the most amazing part of all is what happens next. When there are enough souls who have elevated to the full potential of their light consciousness, there's going to be a miraculous event. A divine consciousness will fill the world and permeate everything. It will speak from the sky, the earth, your own inner being, and at the same time will feel as though it has form and is speaking to you directly. This divine consciousness, an embodiment of unconditional love and source light energy, will fill the hearts and spirits of those who have opened their consciousness enough to receive it. It will invoke a call to action, and all at once, those who can hear it will know exactly what they are meant to do. I do not know if it is individualized or if it is collectively all the same, but it felt as though everyone who heard this call aligned their intention at the exact same time to hold on to a vision of healing for the whole planet and all beings on it. This group are the ones who no longer carry any fear, doubt, or lack of worthiness in their hearts, who have an incredible faith in their vision of a better future, and believe in the power of their intention with such certainty that the potency of their prayer and vision cannot be obstructed by shadow. This divine consciousness, in combination with those that align to its call, will illuminate the earth and everyone on it with a light of healing that purifies everything. The ETs explained to me that if right now, all at once, the entirety of everyone on Earth was to stop destroying this planet and each other, the damage we have caused in this moment now is so unsurmountable that it would take a multitude of generations to reverse the devastation we have caused our planet and its people. And seeing as we are not prepared to stop anytime soon, and the contamination of our world progresses, we are in short beyond repair. They said the only way that we will save ourselves is to stop looking at our world from the third-dimensional perspective, where everything is defined by time and space, believing that we are confined by the density of this reality, therefore slowing and limiting our ability to facilitate the change necessary to heal our world. It will require the effort of many who have been illuminated to access their fifth-dimensional mindset, where the power of belief and positive intention can bring thought into form almost instantaneously. They will change the fabric of this reality for the greater good of all, abolishing fear. The power of healing light will be anchored by this potent group of people holding the vision, and a colossal purification will take place, lifting this planet and everyone on it to a higher dimension. We simply decide to choose a better reality. This is ascension. After this massive healing and reset, everyone will be fully integrated into a higher consciousness, living in a state of love and oneness with all. The ETs will then share with us all aspects of their more advanced way of living, so we too may live more harmoniously with this new earth and each other. They will offer energies and technologies that are sustainable to our world. We will be given a greater system of education and be taught advanced forms of healing. Everyone will desire to live in spiritual harmony with all living things, and we will inspire and lift one another rather than compete. People will contribute to society by doing things that fulfill their spirit as it is in alignment with their greatest passions. All technologies, spiritual practices, medicine, education, and art will be in true alignment with the highest good of all things living. It will be a bona fide golden age. So this incredible revelation, though hopeful and wonderful to consider, had me wondering about the suffering that still must unfold to get us there. Is it necessary, I asked, for so many people to go through all that suffering before we get there? No, they said. It can happen sooner. As you sit, you are now headed towards this deeply polarized reality, where many will experience terrible hardships. But if more of you awaken fast enough, you can bypass that reality. It takes a specific number of you to be open to receive this call to action for it to initiate. So it is dependent on your own people to do what is necessary to get as many of you there as soon as possible. There is no more important time than now to stay in alignment with the light, to hold the higher vision, to not be distraught by the charade of fear that is trying to blind you with hopelessness. You must hold a positive intention in all that you do, and remember that you are all very powerful creators. The second you doubt this in yourself adds to creating more of a limited reality that you are already in. for every kind act to any one person, if it helps them feel even an atom less of despair, or connects them to the feeling of unconditional love, you will create a vibrational lift that ripples through the collective and enhances the opportunity for another person somewhere down the line to reach the full potential of their awakening. It takes the effort of all to get you there. This is how it can be done faster, and that each of you must hold the responsibility in yourself to be mindful of your energy and projections. The ability to exist heart-centered and empowered with love, light, and faith is what will ultimately save your planet. As I processed this vision for the weeks after, I was reminded of another vision I had about a year ago, and wonder if what I saw was what it might be like at the exact moment that the healing light is injected into the earth. In this vision, I saw the earth as two, one more in shadow and one more in light. They were superimposed on top of each other, so that it seemed as though both were coexisting, but those who aligned with one form of the earth or the other would be having a totally different experience. I saw a deepening of separation happening as the worlds were splitting apart, and at the final moment, before they detached from each other, this light filled everything. I observed it like a plasmic curtain of golden light and iridescent rainbow waves of cosmic energy undulating within it. I was in awe as I looked around, and the spirits and beings that I have been perceiving through the veil for most of my life now looked fully embodied. I saw my spirit guides standing beside me, and angelic beings of light and ETs, as well as the other human beings who were like me, observing this grand separation of these two versions of Earth, supported by their guides and angels too. We looked at each other as this wall of light came down, and we could see how it was affecting those who were still anchored to the more shadowy Earth. There were people on the other side of this curtain who had enough opening in their spirits to be affected by this incredible light, and many of them were screaming in the streets. It was as though this light was forcing anything that they had not processed or learned within themselves to surface all at once. A man in front of me had fallen to his knees and clutching his head. He was wailing in horror and despair. When I focused on him, I could hear his thoughts and feel his pain. He was having a very intense life review within himself, and was so clearly aware of all the terrible things he had done and the scope of suffering that he had been subjected to. The level of shame, guilt, and pity he had in himself was unbearable. I could see flashes of the acts that he had committed on others and the abuses that he had endured rolling over his being as he processed the horrid truth of who he had become and how he got there. His heart cried out for mercy and forgiveness, and at the same time he felt unworthy to receive it. The desperation and anguish I saw in him was hard to watch, but I felt nothing but compassion, because I knew he was the product of his own wounds. I knew he had not been one of the fortunate ones who were able to work through their karmic loads and liberate their souls towards the light. It was then that all the higher beings looked to us and said, "There's not much time. Go and save as many as you can." And all of us crossed through this curtain and ran to these people who were facing their own darkness. We put our hands upon them, and in one focused thought we conveyed to them that they were already forgiven. And the shadows that kept them locked into their own madness lifted from them instantaneously, and they were able to stand and join those who were on the other, more illuminated earth. Eventually the two split, and those who were left behind stood in the wake of the shift, confused, realizing so many have disappeared, but having no awareness of what they've missed out on. Those who moved on with the new earth no longer held on to the memory of the old world. They did not even grieve it. They had been rebirthed anew. So there it is, my complete process and interpretation of this potential prophetic path, there for your consideration. Could it be a possibility in our lifetime? I guess we'll see. Until then, it would be no harm for us to spread the light in any way we can and hold on to the faith that we will eventually get to a better reality, no matter what that path may be. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Blessings.